Run, river, run, run through the hills. Run, river, run to the sea. Run, river, run to your place beneath the sun. Run, river, run over me.
Hi, welcome to Be My Guest. Today we have Charlie Trantanella, I said it correctly, with us, and he is from what town now again?
Westford, Massachusetts.
Westford, Mass. And he is an author and has written a biography called, wait till you see the front of this, Preacher, Teacher, Hater, Fraud. And you designed this yourself.
I did. I had some help from my kids. My two kids have helped with all my book covers.
How old are your kids?
My daughter is 26 and my son is 22.
Very good. So they're pretty grown.
They are, yes.
They are. How long did it take you to write this?
All told, it took me about 11 years. I started in 2013, but not full time. It was kind of a side project. I would start researching her life for a few months at a time, then put it down for a few months. And early on, the struggle was finding information about her.
This is the life of Lilla Mabel Hodgkins, a.k.a. Reverend Mabel McCoy, a little Scottish in there, Irwin. Now on the back, he's done a great job. Not only has he got a great picture of himself, but may I read a little bit?
Yeah, please.
Oh, okay. She once reached thousands upon thousands of people a day through her newspaper columns. Something on issues surrounding the family, such as marriage, divorce, and child rearing. She once met with world leaders, advocated for peace amidst the Great War. She once helped run a religious empire that stretched across America. What was the name of that empire?
She was involved with what was called the Emma Hopkins College of Christian Science. So it was kind of a very similar rival to the
Mary Baker Eddy.
Yes.
I'm very, very, very fond of Christian Science. I know it very, very well. My roommate in college was a scientist. I've studied it. I love it. I really do. Lilla Mabel Hodgkins, a.k.a. Reverend Mabel McCoy Irwin, 1856 to 1928. Was born in the rural town of Dexter, Maine. Is that anywhere near Portland?
Not really. I want to say it's about 2 hours, kind of northwest.
She didn't stay there for long. Instead, she embarked on a lifelong journey of fame, fortune, scandal, heartbreak, and notoriety. Though she long advocated for women to strive for a perfect life, her own was anything but. She was a preacher, a teacher, hater, fraud. We're going to start with you telling us each one. Start with preacher. Describe her.
So, right, she had many different jobs throughout her life, but when she was about 40 years old, she turned to ministry, kind of a traditional ministerial role. She studied at Tufts University, it was Tufts College at the time, and she became a Universalist minister here in Massachusetts. So she was the second woman ever ordained as a Universalist minister here in Massachusetts, and she led a congregation in Mansfield for a couple of years. Excuse me. She was also, kind of before that, she was involved with Christian Science and faith healing. She kind of got involved with that through her sister. Her sister was Mary Hodgkins Plunkett, was another Christian scientist based in the Midwest. And together, the two of the sisters, plus Emma Curtis Hopkins, who was a protege of Mary Baker Eddy, they ran a college throughout the Midwest and the West, teaching people the art of faith healing.
Have you ever visited the Mother Church in Boston?
I've been to the outside. I've seen it, and I worked with a few of the archivists.
There's going to be, I think tomorrow, the day before New Year's, in the morning, there's going to have, I just happened to see on TV an event over there. I don't go to that church, but I have a great fondness for it. Very, very fun. She was a teacher.
Right, so early on, she left school around the age of 15 and became a teacher, a primary school teacher. She did that for a little while, and then music was a big part of her family, and so she was a vocal instructor for many years, again as a young woman, young adult. And then later in life, she ran a Montessori school, and so she did a lot of lecturing and worked with a lot of schools later on. But
so she was a teacher.
Right.
Now we're changing personalities. Do you see a psychiatric problem, or just her?
So she definitely had a far from perfect life. And the one thing I talk about in the book, her first marriage, I think, ended up being quite traumatic and kind of set the tone for.
Was it violent?
She was the victim of abuse, yes, from her husband.
Did she have children?
She did not. No.
No. She did not. Where did she live when she became a hater?
She was. She lived up and down New England or the East Coast. She was primarily based in Brooklyn, New York, but also lived for a time in Wilmington, Delaware, and Boston, the Boston area.
What is eugenicist?
So eugenics was a kind of a branch of science that was very popular about 100 years ago. It was based on the idea that all human traits are passed down through hereditary, not just your eye color and hair color, but things that your parents learned. If your parents were good at chess, they would pass that down to you, and if they were criminals, they would pass that down to you by gene.
Okay.
And so eugenicists believe that if we could kind of change the way people have children, or we look at the genetics of it, we could cure a lot of society's ills because again, they believed these things were passed down. They were not learned, they were inherited.
That's partly part of medicine today. They say, genetic, it's genetic, or this and that. So it's got kind of a slant.
It did, but it took it really to the extreme. And
radicalized it.
Yes, and they were very much against. They were very much into things like pure blood. A lot of the terminology they used is pure blood. They did not like mixed marriages, things of that nature. It was really a kind of a racial purity ideology at its core.
Eugenicists who felt all of society's ills could be cured in one generation.
Yep.
If only the undesirables would stop having children.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Right. That was their main.
Wow, that was pretty way out there. I don't know.
Looking back, it was way out there. At the time, it gained wide acceptance. It did for a while. It eventually began to fade. It was a strategy and philosophy taken up by the Nazi government in Germany, and that's when public opinion really started to change.
So the Nazis got into this thing. This sounds like something they'd pull. Early.
They did.
Now Freud, what did she get into there?
So Freud is it's a strong word, but she again spent a lot of her life as a faith healer. She would teach women how to heal themselves using faith. She could never heal herself, though. She went to the doctor quite a bit when she had a lot of issues, and then later in life, she passed herself off as a medical doctor, and she never corrected the record on that.
Never corrected. We are talking with Charlie Trantanella. I got that right.
Yes.
And he is the author of Preacher, Teacher, Hater, Fraud. You want something that's going to hold your attention, to try this one. This is really good. You would say it was a biography. Would you also say it's not a mystery, but sort of a, what would you say? It really holds people's attention like that.
There's a lot of stories in there. I was able, it's not a complete biography of every aspect of her life. A lot of her, it's just the records have been lost. But a lot of her life was documented in newspapers and similar publications. So it's a lot of stories about her. Almost like a memoir, but I don't have the full picture of her life.
You spoke at Tatna.
I did, yes.
Were you in the big room or out in the store?
I was in the event room. I think off to the.
Did you have a good audience?
It was nice. Yeah, it was a nice day.
You had a few people.
Yeah.
I usually, I tell my authors, I said, you got a choice. If you're a little on the new side, the shy side, you might want to sit up front. And then the other ones who are used to giving presentations and all, and you're used now. Have you been to the Book Lovers Gourmet in Webster?
I have not. No.
You need to go there.
Okay.
There are so many places around here.
Yeah.
How many places? Where have you been besides Tatna?
That's the only bookstore I've been to. I've spoken with the Marlborough Historical Society. Reverend Irwin was a minister in Marlborough for a while, and so they hosted me for a talk. I've spoken in Mansfield, Massachusetts, at their library. And again, I worked with these historical societies in the research.
This is the strangest thing. Yes, the other day we were visiting a friend of ours in a recovery, like hospital type of place. His last name was Irwin.
Okay.
And I did a ancestral background on him. When I had first met him in a group get-together, I thought he was a Scotty. He looked like a little Scot. He's Irish, British, French and German, basically, but not. I was so surprised. Irwin, the name Irwin. And there were other things in it, too. Even Ashkenazi Jewish.
Okay.
Now, she first started out as Mrs. Mabel McCoy, 1880 to 1889. Now who did she marry?
So her first marriage was to a man named James Sharon McCoy. He was about 15 years older than her.
What did he do?
He had a very interesting life himself. He had been a Presbyterian minister, but by the time they met, he was an entrepreneur. He was living in Tombstone, Arizona, and he was helping to build a public waterworks system. Near Tombstone, there's a mountain, and he worked to bring the spring water from the mountain into Tombstone.
Did they get along?
At first they did, but again, their marriage was not a happy one, kind of almost from the get-go.
Then we have Reverend Mabel L. McCoy. She changed it from MC to MAC. She went from Irish to Scotch. Did she know she was doing that?
I think it was deliberate, and she does flip back and forth throughout the years. It was never consistent, which made the research a little difficult.
Irwin Moore. So she added those.
Right.
Why?
So Francis Irwin was her second husband, and that marriage did not last either. And then Edward Moore was her third marriage.
And that lasted.
That did not last either.
That did not last either. Was it because she was getting herself into trouble?
The short answer is I don't know exactly, but my speculation is that by this time in her life, by the time her second marriage came along, she was of the opinion that physical intimacy was not something people should engage in unless they were going to produce a child. And by the time she married her second time, I think she was beyond childbearing. And so her philosophy was, we should only have spiritual love. There should be no physical intimacy. She was a strict proponent of abstinence, even in marriages. And my guess is her partners did not share that.
And they married her.
They did.
Did they know ahead of time?
I'm guessing no.
Yeah. I wouldn't think that would go over too well. Oh, my God. Listen, Charlie, how can people get a hold of you if they'd like you to come do a presentation or get your book?
So the easiest way is email. My email address is Tranti, Tranti, @comcast.net. I have the books available on Amazon and eBay. And this Preacher, Teacher, Hater, Fraud is also available at Tatnook.
And we're talking about his latest book. He's got a couple others he's going to show us. Preacher, Teacher, Hater, Fraud. Now that's quite a distance to go. I mean, for a person to suddenly just changed. It's almost as if she became, what's the word when somebody hates the world? Or they're resentful. Mm-hmm. Now here we come to Miss Dr. Mabel Irwin. She passed herself off as a medical doctor?
I would say she didn't actively discourage people from that. There were a lot of, she wrote a lot of newspaper articles, and the byline would either be, Reverend Irwin, or then later in life would say Dr. Irwin, and she never corrected the record. And sometimes she was called a surgeon, even though she had no medical training.
Sometimes, I think sometimes ministers may call themselves doctor. Maybe they have a PhD or something like that. What was the slow slide out? March 6, 1916 to 1928 when she passed. Slow slide out. What happened?
Well, so she, as you mentioned in the beginning, in the 1910s, especially, she was widely known across America through her newspaper columns. She worked for William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper publisher. She wrote a lot of editorials, and they were published all across the country. But as she got a little bit older, she kind of cut back on her lectures, and she stopped writing newspaper columns. And so she started, I call it the slow slide out into kind of a semi-obscurity. because she stopped being a household name, and it became harder and harder to find things that she wrote. And when she did lecture, or it would be very local and not on the topics that she.
How did she hook up with Randolph Hearst?
That's a wonderful question. She definitely circulated in the intellectual fields within New York City. There was a big movement, especially in the early 1900s, an intellectual socialist movement, people trying out all sorts of new ideas, and she was drawn to that community.
Right.
And a lot of these people published magazines and newspapers,
Sure.
and she was involved in that. She ran a number of publications herself, and so I'm guessing it just kind of through mutual connections. She ended up as she was called a lady editor.
She had a very intellectual streak, perhaps.
She did.
Yeah.
She did. She wrote a lot, and again, she dove in the early 1900s. She really dove into Walt Whitman's poetry, kind of on her own accord.
What got you interested in this, Charles? Charlie.
Yeah. So I first kind of discovered her when I was researching my first book on. I was writing about the history of student organizations at Tufts University. And kind of one seminal moment at Tufts was the fall of 1892, when women were first admitted on equal terms. Tufts had been, all male for 40 years, and then they finally admitted women.
Mm.
And so Mabel McCoy, was one of the first women to enroll. There were 10 women that enrolled the first year. And she enrolls in the divinity school, and one of the first things she does when she's on campus is she joins a previously all-male fraternity. And
they let her in.
They let her in. Her and her roommate, another woman, Angie Brooks, both joined the fraternity, and they helped establish one of the first co-ed fraternities in America, if not the first. And she turned the house where she lived into the first fraternity house at Tufts campus. And
so she made it co-ed.
She did, and that was very much against the Victorian era rules of the school at the time.
It's not really acceptable now either. Guys like their frats and the girls.
It's not very common, right? Co-ed fraternities do exist, but they are not very common.
Charlie, where are you going to appear next?
I don't have anything on the schedule right now, but I'm talking with the Medford Historical Society about possibly speaking with them next year, and I'm also hoping for the Somerville Historical Society.
If somebody would like to have you come speak, give a presentation, how far would you go?
I've gone as far down as Connecticut and New England.
New England.
Yeah.
Now, he's going to show us the other books that he wrote. Show us some by way of how they came about.
Oh.
We're talking with Charlie Trantanella, author, and he's going to start showing the rest of the books he wrote.
So this was the first book I wrote. It's called Brown and Blue in Greek, A History of Fraternities, Sororities, and Early Student Organizations at Tufts University. So I graduated from Tufts University.
You went to, what did you major in?
Electrical engineering.
So that's your other job?
Yes. So the history is the fun, the hobby. And so this one I started in 2010, and I thought it would take me 9 months, and I finished in 2017. So it took a little longer than I thought.
Wow, yeah.
But this was a lot of fun.
Never heard of it. It's a shame.
It's again a very niche book. I've primarily marketed it to people in the Tufts community and through the Tufts bookstore. And I mean that's. But I have had interest from other places as well.
Sure. And you did that cover too?
I did. This was my first cover. So looking back,
who's on that cover?
So on the cover, this is a kind of a photo of a fraternity at Tufts from the early 1900s.
With her in it?
No, I could not find a photo of Reverend McCoy from Tufts.
They may have done that on purpose.
Photographs were few and far between in 1892.
Interesting. I'm glad you got that on there.
Yeah. So this was a fraternity that was on campus, and then on the back I have one of the first sororities. The women.
Was she in that one?
She was not. No.
She really chose, didn't she?
But she was on campus the time that some of these women were as well.
She's confusing to me.
Very interesting woman. Yes.
She goes. Now show us the rest of these other ones.
So the second book I wrote is my memoir.
Your memoir?
Yes. It's called Sister Christian Has Left the Building.
Yes, you did send me that.
Stories of growing
up. Yes, you did.
Okay. Right. So this is a collection of stories I wrote over about 20 years.
Sister Christian Has Left the Building. What is that about?
So the first part of the title is in reference to the song "Sister Christian" by Night Ranger. Night Ranger was a very popular hair metal band in the 1980s, and one of their signature songs was "Sister Christian." And I loved the song at the time. I still love the song. And so I'm in high school. This is a very popular song, and it was involved when a moment in my life, I was trying to date two women at once, and it did not work out. That's why Sister
Was she a
Christian.
nun?
No, it has nothing to do with
Religion, no.
religion. It was, again, the title of the song. I believe the songwriter wrote it about his sister kind of growing up and coming of age and things.
Wow.
So.
And then when did you write that?
So I started writing the stories in 2004, but I published this in 2023.
And you show them the cover. That's you in a tux.
It is. This is me from my senior prom.
Your senior prom.
Yes.
Where did you go to high school?
I went to West Hill High School in Stamford, Connecticut.
Stanford. I lived in Stanford, Connecticut.
You did?
I lived in New Canaan, Stanford.
Okay.
Yeah.
I grew up in Stamford, so.
Yeah, Stanford, right near the Merritt Parkway.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, it's a small world.
It is.
So you grew up in Stamford,
I
Connecticut.
did.
That's quite a leap up to Massachusetts and where you are now.
Well, again, I went to Tufts University for school, and my aunt and uncle for many decades lived in Lexington, and so as a family we would come up to
Sure.
Eastern Massachusetts.
How many children in your family?
So I'm one of four. I have three younger sisters.
You were the oldest.
Yes.
And you were the big brother.
Yes.
Boy, were they lucky. They had you to look out for them.
Could you tell them that?
Charlie, show us the next one.
That was
it.
Yeah, the other
Okay,
one.
so those, how come those aren't out on the shelves yet?
Again, so the Brown and Blue and Greek, I have it for sale at the Tufts University bookstore.
Right.
Again, mainly
And Amazon.
and Amazon and eBay, and same with.
And when you go to give your presentations, people want to see you in person.
Mhm.
Amazon is nice.
Yeah.
But you know what? They want to see you.
Yes.
And you got to get yourself out there.
Okay.
You really do. Do you have time? Are you working?
I do have time. Yes.
You do have the
Yeah.
time. You are not retired.
For now, I am. Yes.
I was going to say, you're too young. You're too young to be retired. I like the red. You know, the red that he chose for this with her pictures. Was that hard to figure out?
When I started thinking about the cover, I had that photo of her that I got from the Dexter Maine Historical Society, and they gave me a few photos, but I was drawn to that one from just the look in her face, and so I started thinking about how to incorporate that in a cover, and just doing some sketching out and some kind of fooling around with PowerPoint. I like the combination of the red and the black and the gray.
I do too, and the white is
Yep.
I know I've read about Mary Baker Eddy for many years, and you can tell they're from the same generation.
Mhm.
The hair,
Mm-hmm.
there's an expression, the way she's dressed. Fascinating. It really did.
She dressed very conservatively. Her high collars, the long dresses, the long sleeves.
I'm just surprised she changed her tune to becoming a hater and a fraud. Why didn't it work out with preacher and teacher?
I think one of my theories is that, again, her first marriage was so disruptive to her life. It involved a lot of depression. She was hospitalized for about 16 months.
She was what?
Hospitalized.
Yeah.
She was in treatment for a while, and I think the trauma of that kind of set her down maybe the path she'd never anticipated. And was kind of searching for identity, searching for acceptance, searching proving that she, in a sense, was right about a lot of her philosophy. She was very stubborn.
Well, how young was she, Charlie, when she got married first?
So she was married in 1881,
yeah.
and she was born in 1856. So is that 25?
Well, that's young now.
And he was 41 when they were married.
How did they meet?
The connection I could find between them is in early 18 or in the say August of 1880, they were both listed on the manifest of a train heading from Omaha to San Francisco, And so because newspapers used to publish who was writing the
Maybe
train.
they talked.
And my guess is that that's how they met, because she had just returned from abroad,
Yeah.
and he was again living in Arizona, but traveling between New York and Arizona quite a bit. So my guess is they met on the train.
She doesn't look like a particularly happy person.
Not in that photo, no.
No, kind of a bland sadness. Almost bland. Do you have another book coming up?
At the moment, I do not. I'm kind of. I have a few ideas.
Yeah, but you're working on this, getting this out
Yes.
there, right? Well, let me see. You've been to Tatnuck, and where did you say you might like to go next?
I'm talking with the Medford Historical Society,
Yeah.
and hopefully Somerville Historical
Where
Society.
would you like to go the most? There are so many independent
Right.
bookstores, libraries, historical societies. What takes your fancy more?
I enjoy them all. I've spoken at all sorts of places. I enjoy the interaction with people and presenting the story and the questions. That's always the fun part, when people can ask questions at the end and kind of get a two-way conversation going.
And your website?
I don't have a personal website, but again, my email is tranti, Tranti, at comcast.net, and I have the books on Amazon and eBay.
Now, are you going to go over to our library? You know, we have a dedicated local authors section, and put it up. What an exhibit!
That would be a lot of fun. Yes.
It's. We'll just tell you, it's right. It's a second up the street.
Okay, yep.
This used to be at downstairs, but it's right up. Wonderful that we've had. It doesn't have nearly even half of the authors we've had on for like thousands of years, but great idea to get it up there, because that's another way to get people to read it, especially if they've seen the show. Mm-hmm. And since we're on YouTube, you know you're all over the world. Yes. So Charlie Trantanella, preacher, teacher, hater, fraud book that he wrote, kind of a biography. I think it's going to hold your attention. So go on over to the library, go over to the local authors dedicated section, pick up the copy there, and see if you like the book. And do you have an email where they could write to you if they like, if any suggestions or anything they like about it? Could they contact you?
Yes, Tranti, Tranti, at comcast.net.
Okay. Thank you for being with us. If you have another one coming up in the next year or so, let me know, and we'll have you on again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jim.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate
We'll
this.
see you next time. Maybe you're my guest.
Riding on a shooting star, heading out toward a dream. Tomorrow's even closer than it seems.